Welcome back. It's 8:41. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Anne and Martin.
So, we are going headline making. We're having a look at any of the news stories that are popping up from the newspapers this morning with Suzanne Holder and Tom Slater. And just before the break, I was talking about Freddie Flintoff and this terrible crash that happened when he was filming for Top Gear. And we've always imagined that he was going at one heck of a lick. In fact, I think we were told it was something like 150 miles an hour. Susan, but in the Mail, it's giving us a different story.
It is. It's saying he actually, the accident happened when they were going at 22 miles per hour, which is quite surprising. But it has been about 9-10 months since this accident, and nobody's seen anything of Freddie Flintoff for quite a while, till quite recently. Yeah. And clearly, when he was pictured, you can see that I think half of his face has been very paralysed. He's had lots of operations. But the story here and the details that I've seen says that the car he was in didn't have a roof. It did have like a halo thing, but he was dragged along the tarmac on his face. And some of the people working on the show actually had to have counselling after what they saw.
So, like I said, from the beginning, we've all imagined, or I thought we were actually told, it was something like 150 miles an hour.
As part of the headline.
But that may have been some of the route that he was doing. But when the crash happened, he was on a bend.
He was on a bend, so it was taking a corner, and it flipped over onto its roof. He wasn't wearing a helmet, and there wasn't a roof to the car, and that's where the injuries were sustained. And there's also kind of a bit of misinformation going around. Nobody's absolutely sure whether Top Gear has been completely cancelled or not. They seem to have paused it, but they've kind of flick-flacked on that. But obviously investigations have been launched. There doesn't seem to be any particular blame. It's a tragic accident, obviously.
I think what happened here is it was a three-wheeled car.
Yeah.
So it had two wheels at the front, one at the back, and it was the first corner. He tipped it into the first corner, and the car rolled. So it seems like maybe he was applying his usual driving technique to an unusual vehicle, and a tragic accident happened. But at low speed, it just goes to show you, he rolled over. There was no cage on this car. You can see a picture of it there.
Yeah.
It's just got like headrests, and his head was literally the first thing that touched down.
In a way, it's a real lesson to us all, isn't it? That, you can imagine a terrible crash would happen at 150, but when you learn that something so life-changing could happen, yes, albeit in slightly unusual circumstances, at 22 miles an hour, it shows that maybe we need to pay an awful lot more respect to the way we drive and to certain of the vehicles that we drive with, and that you should take all sorts of different sort of safety measures.
And you do see people as well, driving around, especially in cities, on bikes and sometimes, motorbikes. And when they aren't wearing a helmet, you do kind of think, what are you thinking? Because the kind of injury that you can sustain is just so life-changing.
Yeah, Tom, should we cut to one of yours now? It's obviously Labour conference kicks off today. The Daily Mail obviously are having a pop at Labour. This time it's about the fact Labour is pledging to make it easier for people to change sex.
And as you say, would naturally expect the Mail on Sunday to go after Labour on some of these questions, but this has been such an open goal for the Labour Party for so long. So there is a policy which is being considered by the National Policy Forum, which would look at the process of gender recognition. Of course, the last few years has been bound up with all of these rows over whether or not so-called gender self-ID should be introduced, essentially making it a matter of self-declaration, the question of your quote-unquote gender identity. This would look at the quote here, talking about the current process is intrusive, outdated and humiliating. You currently have to live within your new acquired gender for 2 years. You need to have this kind of sign-off of a doctor in the plan, as we saw proposed in Scotland, was originally to kind of pare that back. I think Labour are in a really difficult position here, first of all, because they are butting up against biological reality and the opinion of the vast majority of the British public. Keir Starmer has thankfully moved on this question, but the best he's managed so far from saying that it was wrong to say that a woman is an adult human female, he's now said that his current position is 99.9% of women don't have penises, but as mathematicians cleverer than I have pointed out, that's still an awful lot of penises. And this is the sort of issue which is that this is one of those things which I find so fascinating, because Keir Starmer has willfully upset the left of his party on so many particular issues. He campaigned as kind of Corbyn, but who would be willing to do up his time singing the national anthem, and then on all those economic policies he's U-turned. There's all kinds of things on which he's been happy to raise hackles amongst his kind of rank and file because he wants to be electable. On this issue, where the vast majority of people are on the same page, which is to say you should be respectful to trans people, they shouldn't be discriminated against in any meaningful way, but there is such thing as biological sex, and there are rights which flow from that. He feels incapable of properly
actually
saying that out
on
loud.
one side or the other.
And I think that's going to come back to bite him, definitely.
Isn't that a consistent point with Starmer, though? Like, people don't really know what Starmer stands for on a great many things. And the Labour Party, on the one hand, they try, oh, it's just the culture war, nobody really cares about this. But as we saw in Scotland, with Isla Bryson, the biological man who said they're a woman who's put into a jail, women's jail, it is incredibly emotive, and it does motivate voters because it's about protecting women and fairness.
It is about fairness. And it's also skewing statistics left, right and centre when you're recording crimes by the gender that somebody is presenting by and not by their biological. So you do have, you know, far more women now apparently committing sexual offences and rapes, which they've never done before. And how to treat that. It puts the police and it puts the legal system and it puts courts in a very difficult position. And it also means that we're going to miss out on how to deal with certain issues if we're misunderstanding who is committing those. How do you deal with that? How do you come up with policy? How do you put safety measures in place if you're actually looking in the wrong place for the people who are involved in certain things? I think that's also.
And isn't the debate totally out of proportion as well?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to me every single day there's some big trans issue that gets people hot under the collar. And is it really proportionate? It can't be, can it?
I think it's proportionate, but only as far as behind the scenes, these policies have been coming in and changing. And now people are finding out about them, and that's why there's such a plethora of them. People weren't aware that you had all of these kind of gender-neutral policies in various different corporations. People weren't aware that it was a situation, not just in Scotland, but even in England, where you could have sex offenders being put in women's prisons, because everyone assumed that it's just a matter of common sense that you wouldn't do that. So I think the reason...
We assumed common sense.
And I think
that wasn't the case,
media, people blame the media, oh, there's a story every day. But actually, like you say, if people aren't made aware that actually some of the biggest companies in the country have certain policies that you might work for them, but you don't know, it is actually the media's job to let people know that kind of thing is going on.
And there's a lot of feeling, I think, that this legislation has happened by stealth. And people are becoming aware of it, and they are, I think, rightly often quite cheesed off. On to the next point, Susan, that leads us neatly into somebody that people are often cheesed off with, London Mayor Sadiq Khan.
Yes.
What's he done now?
What's he done now, basically,
Well, he's calling on the government to expand acceptable identification for voters. And the point he's making, and it's not a bad one actually on this point, I don't think, is that things like if you're going to take identification with you to vote, which we will all need to do, and not everybody is aware of. So first of all, he's saying everyone needs to be more aware of that, otherwise you might turn up and be denied your vote. But things like I didn't realise, discount travel cards for pensioners are allowed, but as proof of identity at the polling station, but not student ID or young people's travel cards.
There's a reason for that.
Well, what is the reason for that?
The reason for that is when you apply... Well, no, the reason for that is when you apply for a pensioner's bus pass, you have to show a valid ID to get it.
Right.
Like a passport or a driver's licence, whereas you don't have to apply a valid national acceptable form of ID to get a student card, so the pensioner's validation has been validated.
Why can't I just get a student card then? You must have to do something.
No, you can get one, but you don't have to show ID to get it. Therefore, that student card hasn't been verified against an acceptable documentation, if you get me. Anyway, I'm digressing.
I do get it, but I think that's a very interesting point.
What about
because we talked about it in the green room, and I think the word you used was it just looks a bit... What was the word you used?
I wasn't aware of this detail, but if you've got a situation where older people are able to vote, that's obviously going to skew towards not away from the Labour Party, shall we say. So it's going to look rigged if that was the case. But as you say, there's always more nuance to these things.
And a lot of people, of course, historically have been saying, well, why is it that the left are against voter ID? Because there have been allegations, of course, and provable, imprisonments of vote rigging in certain left-wing boroughs, including Tower Hamlets.
Well, I think when it comes to this, you do have to tread carefully, because I think anything that puts a kind of extra hurdle between someone and being able to vote can become a problem. And it could also, I can imagine this also being a problem for older voters as well, not least because they wouldn't be aware that they would need to carry this. So I think adding hurdles between someone and their ability to vote, you've got to do it very carefully. I think it's also quite clear that where there have been a lot of controversies is often around postal voting and kind of harvesting in that sort of sense, which is not necessarily a case of turning up to your polling station with your ID. That being said, I think it's as long as these rules are, if we are to have these rules, they have to be enforced in as even-handed and proportionate a way, and also just to make sure everyone knows about them, because you wouldn't want to be in a situation where people are turning up expecting to vote and can't. That would be a real problem, definitely.
OK, Tom, tell us very quickly why the price of a pint is getting out of proportion again.
It is.
Essentially, it's just overheads for publicans at this point in terms of both their energy bills, which are still a lot higher than they were historically, as well as rents and so on. So we're getting to the situation now, according to the Office for National Statistics, I didn't know they looked into this, but I'm glad that they do, the typical cost is already at £4.62 per pint, and it's looking like it's going to top £5. And it's one of those things where you think...
Believable.
Especially if you think about how many thousands of pubs have been closing over the course of the past 10, 15 years, kind of post-smoking ban. They're really under the cosh anyway, and now all of this situation where they have been struggling to compete with the supermarkets and the retailers and whatever, and we're going to be in real trouble if these things kind of get completely out of hand, and it's something which it's difficult to see where that kind of allowance is going to be made for. You know, they freeze beer duty all they like, but at the same time, these prices are still incredibly high.
Yesterday, I bought a pint of beer at Paddington Station. Guess what I paid for a pint of lager?
£8.
No, £6.50. I was so angry, I drank it.
They got another one.
Very, very quickly, we must get this in, Susan.
Yeah.
Why do people who earn more money, why are they more likely to cheat on their partners?
Well, I don't know why it is, although we could all probably have a guess, but apparently statistically it is true that if you earn more money as a man, you are more likely to cheat, but if you are a lower paid woman, you're more likely... well, the Daily Star has used the phrase that they can't keep their hands to themselves women on a low wage. And the headline they've gone, which I do like, is that a wallet in your pocket or are you just pleased to see me? Is what they've gone with. But yeah, there is a natural kind of solution to that, though, I think, in some ways, isn't there? But
is this
equal pay?
Is this wandering want-away men, or is it the fact that actually they're very desirable and therefore they have women for themselves?
That's what they're telling us, yes. But the person telling us that is a car dealer. Well, the person I would think top of the list of people you shouldn't trust is a second-hand car salesman. But there you go. But it comes from, because if you want to know where all these statistics, easy for me to say, are coming from, it's elicitingencounters.com, which apparently...
Noted pollster.
which is a dating site for married couples, which I have to say I don't quite understand the point of, but there you go.
And they have a vested
of that
interest in rich blokes getting on dating websites.
Oh, well, thank you for being fabulous headline makers for us today.
Great morning.
Some brilliant stories, actually. And the one we didn't cover is the size of the ozone hole, which is apparently 3 times the size of Brazil and could get larger.
I thought that had gone.
No, it's there. It's 3 times the size of Brazil.
But it does go bigger and go smaller. But
look,
There it
there's a
is,
lovely
look.
picture of it.
It's massive.
Yeah.
it is massive.
I thought that had gone. I thought that was yesteryear. I thought that was the climate
it's
emergency.
still there. Yeah.
Oh, well.
OK, well, do stick with us because never mind that huge ozone gap, ozone hole. Let's find out how the weather's going to affect us all.